Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new Team-CBT. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hi, David. And welcome listeners to episode 230. My son Josh, who does the sound editing for us, he thinks it's so odd that I laugh every time you say hello, Rhonda, but people who are listening can't see the look on your face.
Okay. Maybe we should go to video and post these on YouTube also.
Yeah. So today
sure.
Today we're going to do another Ask David, and we have 12 questions, 13 questions. The first 6 are from someone named Jay. But first I thought I'd read a really cool kind of generic podcast endorsement from someone named Mitzi, who's a marriage and family therapist. And she wrote, "Hi, David. Thank you so much for everything you do. I took a course from you at the beginning of my career as a therapist, and I cannot tell you how much you've helped me as well as my clients. Your information and research means everything to me. You have literally saved some of my clients' lives. I just wanted you to know this. I'm so grateful, Mitzi."
Thank you, Mitzi. I just appreciate so much your thoughtfulness in emailing, and I'm just so glad that my books and our podcasts and our efforts have been helpful not only to you but to your patients, and that's what it's all about is helping people who are in despair and anxiety and depression and feeling of inadequacy and worthlessness get back to joy and waking up and saying it's great to be alive. So really appreciate the feedback. So onward and upward with maybe we can do 6 of these 13 Ask Davids and then save some for the next edition. Actually, there's 14 now because we got a question from Fabrice about the self, but that'll be probably for a later podcast.
Okay, well, Jay asks, and we've talked a lot about homework lately, but he's asking something that's very specific. Is psychotherapy homework still required if you've recovered completely from depression in a single extended therapy session?
That's a cool question, and it took me aback at first. I had to think about it for a couple days to figure out what the answer is, because you see, in the early days of cognitive therapy, like in the 1980s and early 1990s, I didn't have these ultra-fast techniques that I have now. So most patients were requiring a number of sessions before they recovered from depression or anxiety. And the research indicated that virtually everyone who did psychotherapy homework, at least with some consistency, improved or recovered dramatically in the first 12 weeks of therapy. And everyone who refused pretty much did not improve or recover. Most of them got worse, or some of them just dropped out of therapy. So I made homework a requirement if you wanted to be treated with what I was then calling cognitive behavior therapy. Now that we've got Team-CBT, I see people for double sessions. And in my experience, 90% of my patients have a complete elimination of symptoms in a single session. And then I do relapse prevention training, and then they're pretty much good to go. So how can you be talking about homework with somebody who's already recovered? And here's the answer. And I'm going to wrinkle some pages here because I jotted them down. But first off, one kind of homework that I still require of people is to listen to the therapy session recording or watch the therapy session if we did it on Zoom, so they have a video. I've always required patients to listen to audios, even before the days of cell phones or the internet. I had a tape recorder in my office and also a video camera, and they had to bring in a tape. And then we'd just stick it into the audio recorder or the video, the camcorder, and then we'd have our session. At the end, I'd give them the recording, and they had to listen to it. And my patients always said that the recordings were way more useful than the session themselves. And to this day, I'm shocked why most therapists don't use this tool. Now, of course, if your sessions aren't any good, there's no point in recording them or forcing your patients to listen to them. But if really awesome things are happening and you're using externalization of voices and the acceptance paradox and other dramatic and powerful techniques, then you want that recorded and you want the patients to listen to it, because they get a lot more juice out of the session when they hear it for the second time. And so that's still homework, even if you've recovered in a single session. Number two, when I'm working with people with depression or anxiety, I'm always working with a daily mood log, so they're writing down their negative thoughts, like I'm a loser, or I should be doing way more with my career. Others are probably going to be disappointed in me because I'm not achieving as much as I should be, or some such thoughts. And the patient might have 8 or 10 or 12 or even more negative thoughts on the daily mood log. And during the session, once we've crushed one thought, we just blow through all the rest of them with externalization of voices. The only thing that takes time, for the most part, is crushing the first negative thought. Then the person gets on a kind of a high, and they can typically crush all or most of the rest of their thoughts. But this moves fast with role-playing. And so a second homework assignment is to finish up that daily mood log, writing it down on paper. Since we just role-played it during the session, write down all your positive thoughts, put how much you believe them between 0 and 100, then how much does that reduce your belief in your negative thoughts. A third homework assignment is to find out if they're committed to using a daily mood log on paper in the future whenever you get upset and start to have negative thoughts again. And that's tremendously important, that you pick up the tools again. Now, I have a question for you, Rhonda. Mm-hmm. And Mark Noble asked me this, not about you specifically, but about team therapists in general. On Saturday, we had an hour and a half, a beautiful catch-up session. And by the way, he loves your Wednesday group and being a small group leader. So he was a happy camper. But he said he wondered if team therapists do write down their negative thoughts on paper when they get upset. And I said, I'll ask them. And so I'm asking you.
Yes, I do.
Fantastic.
If I have upset, I do. I like the process. And you know who I learned that from? I learned that from Marilyn Coffey.
Oh, really?
At an intensive, she said she filled out a daily mood log every day, no matter what.
Oh, I didn't know that about Marilyn. Bless her heart.
I don't do that. I don't do that. But if I have an upset, I absolutely fill out a daily mood log. I find it very helpful. Fantastic. And that would be an important assignment for anybody who's recovered from depression or anxiety. And then also I do relapse prevention training following the initial recovery, and advise the patient that a relapse is 1 minute or more of feeling crappy. And given that definition, we all relapse all the time. And so they have to know that when they do relapse, not only will their original negative thoughts return, but they'll also have the typical relapse thoughts like, oh, this proves the therapy didn't work. It was just a Band-Aid and I need some deeper treatment or something like that. And I actually role play those after the recovery so the patient can hear themselves
crushing those thoughts. I play the role of the negative self. They play the role of the positive self. And they also have to then pull out that recording and listen to it if they relapse. And usually that's enough to pop out of a relapse. And then I tell them, if you ever have a relapse you can't handle, call me and I'll be glad to see you again. One other, that's the answer to that first question about homework.
Okay. And then he wrote to you, is the book 10 Days to Self-Esteem better than the single chapter on this topic in your book, Feeling Good?
Yes, I think it would be. And I wrote 10 Days to Self-Esteem because I had for time, and still have to a certain extent, a view of a kind of free self-help program around the United States, around the world, like Alcoholics Anonymous, but for depression. And the 10 Days to Self-Esteem is the curriculum for such a program. It can be set up by therapists to be used in a hospital or in an outpatient setting. It's a 10-step cognitive therapy program that we've had great experience with. My whole hospital used that as a treatment model in Philadelphia, the Presbyterian, what was then called Presbyterian Medical Center. It's now owned by Penn. But we had that program, and there's 2 books. One you can get on Amazon called 10 Days to Self-Esteem, and that's the manual we gave everyone who came into our hospital cognitive therapy group program in Philadelphia. And then I wrote a second book you can also get on Amazon as an ebook called 10 Days to Self-Esteem, the Leader's Manual. So if any of you are interested in starting a self-help book, this is a 10-step program. There's 10 sessions laid out, and it shows you exactly how to run each of those 10 sessions. But you can also just read that book and do the exercises in it on your own. And I would think it would have a lot more for you than just the single chapter in Feeling Good. I must say that somebody recently wrote me about the single questions about that chapter in Feeling Good, and was it still valid? And I was amazed. That I could have written that chapter yesterday, and I'm still totally behind it. And I talk about the different levels of self-esteem, which is the way I think about it now. And the first level of self-esteem, and sometimes I like to teach this to children, although I'm not totally behind it, is you say, well, you're special, because you have a beautiful singing voice, or because you have nice eyes, or something like this. To find something about a child who's maybe not doing well and has low self-confidence, and find something positive about them to praise them for. And my wife and I do that, with our cats all the time. We pet them and tell them they're wonderful and they're the most special cat in Los Altos, and they really eat it up. They purr and smile and, rub up against us. That's nice. Conditional self-esteem, and what happens when your pretty eyes go blind, or what happens when your pretty singing voice isn't so great compared with other kids who have much better singing voices, and you don't make the choir or whatever. So the next level of self-esteem is unconditional self-esteem. That's where you love yourself as a choice, and not because you've earned it through your achievements or through some talent you have or accomplishments that you've made. You just make the choice to love and accept yourself just because you're a human being, and that's called unconditional self-esteem. And that has a kind of a religious meaning for a lot of people as well. But then the next level, once you've developed unconditional self-esteem, is then you throw your self-esteem away as fast as you can, and you realize that it's just another perfectionistic trap, and that you never needed self-esteem in the first place. It's just a waste of time. And I've learned that when I was playing table tennis, and I learned that, from my cats. And from when I'm working with Rhonda on the podcast.
Oh, no, you don't.
Yes.
Wow.
We're just having fun.
Yeah.
You see, and we're not trying to be special. We're
Right.
not trying to be worthwhile. We don't need to be worthwhile. We're too busy hanging out and having fun.
Right.
And so that's like a life without self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And just get rid of the notion as a kind of waste of time. And that's also the same as what the Buddha called the great death of the self, or enlightenment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can see that in my career as a martial artist.
Oh, you can?
I can. Like when I first started, I was like, oh yeah, I am special, or I'm good because I can do this form, or I can throw a hard punch. And, there were things I had to do in order to be, give myself the label of a martial artist. And
was
then
this
I thought,
karate?
Yeah.
Yeah. I did 6 months of karate.
Well, you must have had fun those 6 months.
It was, yeah.
Why'd you stop?
Well, I just did a couple summers when I was in college. I went to the YMCA in Phoenix, and they had this karate thing, and at that point, I felt I was, enough of a killer. I didn't need to. I'm sure it was all an illusion. I'm sure anyone could have pounded my ass, but I felt I could go this and rock can and fake a kick and go like this, and it will smash their arteries, and they'll have a brain hemorrhage and die. That's what.
That's all he said.
Okay, well, since I can give anyone a brain hemorrhage, I'm good. But how did you learn that?
It took me 26 years to get to that place. Well, then I moved into more of the unconditional. Like it's my choice that I don't need to achieve a hard kick or something. I'm just, I'm a good martial artist because I'm choosing to consider myself to be that way. And then as I got older and I was now in classes with people who are younger than me, I had to throw out that and just say, I'm here. All of that is a waste of time. Like it's not what I've done, or it's not even a choice. It's just, I'm just here to have fun.
Yeah.
And learn
how to kill people.
And learn how to kill people. It doesn't matter how good I am.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like liberation from this endless need to better yourself. Do you know my Matt May story?
Well, I know a lot of the Matt May story. Which one are you talking about?
Well, I supervised him when he was a resident at Stanford, and he was always brilliant and humble and incredibly effective. And we would generally work 2 or 3 hours once a week going over his cases, and we'd go down to Los Altos and order a pizza in this place that had great pizza, and then we'd eat it and talk about his cases and stuff, and then we'd drive home. And one night we were driving back to my house, and we came to a stop sign, and Matt is a real sincere person.
Yes.
And, a dominatingly skillful therapist. If any of you are looking for the world's greatest therapist, go to Matt May, MD, or go to Rhonda's.
No, Matt May is the world's greatest therapist. That is definitely, I concur with that.
Right. I mean, he is just jaw-dropping.
He is.
And kind also. But at any rate, we came to this stop sign, and I think he was driving, and I was sitting in the passenger seat, and he turned to me with this like deep, sincere eyes and said, Dr. Burns, I just want you to know that I'm trying harder, trying every day, everything I can do to become a better and better person. And then I looked at him with equally sincere, deep eyes and said, Matt, I hope you get over that one of these days. And then he burst into laughter, and he got his enlightenment at that moment. Isn't it cool?
That is really cool. That's good role modeling for the rest of us.
All right. Number 3 from Jay.
Okay. This is a 2-part question. Here's the first part. Are people who were abused emotionally when growing up more likely to get involved with narcissistic or borderline individuals later in life because the relationship is quote unquote familiar. I was involved with the woman.
Yeah, let's just stop it there.
Oh,
I'll
just stop
give
it
the
there. Okay, stop
story
it there.
and the answer. Yeah, it sounds like he was involved with a woman, attracted to a woman with borderline personality disorder, and it was a horrible experience. And then wisely, I think he was able to break up with her.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this theory that maybe if you had parents who had similar personality disorders, it's kind of like a psychodynamic thinking. So you look
Mm-hmm.
for others to reenact some pattern you had with your parents. And I personally, I was trained, as you know, for a couple of years at least in this psychoanalytic stuff, and I didn't really believe any of it. I'm a researcher. I test theories on the computer where I have a database and I do statistical modeling. When I have real data, it seems like all theories turn out to be untrue. Every theory that all mental health professionals have about the causes of things are pretty much untrue theories, just based on shabby research or no research at all. And while that might be an interesting theory, that, you had a borderline parent and so you're going to be attracted to borderline women or a borderline male figure, to me, it just, I don't think there's much truth in it. But a lot of men, my wife points out that a lot of men are attracted to women with borderline personality disorder. And maybe that's because of the drama involved in the relationship. And, men only want what they can't get, not what they can get. Women are the same way. And so when you're working with, interacting with someone with borderline personality, you face a lot of rejection and some, kind of abusive, arguably behavior. And lots of people are attracted to that kind of relationship.
But Jay's making something like a cause, but could it be a correlation? Like, or is there a relationship between what you experienced growing up and what you are attracted to as an adult? Because have you heard this about alcohol? Have you heard this? The joke was when I was in graduate school. Maybe it's not so funny.
Okay.
But what happens when you live with an alcoholic family? When you grow up with an alcoholic family, you either a child of an alcoholic either becomes an alcoholic, marries an alcoholic, or becomes a therapist for alcoholics.
Oh, I see. Well, I mean, people love those kind of theories because people want to think they know the causes of things. But those things would be very difficult to research. Getting good, accurate data would cost tremendous amount of money and resources. And then your data analysis would show that there is no correlation. And then people who have been espousing that theory would have no interest in your research, so it wouldn't make an impact. That's the problem from my point of view. I used to publish papers proving that different theories can't be correct, but often I had the only paper in the world literature to prove that. Mm-hmm. But the people who wanted to believe it just went on believing it. They were only interested in promoting their ideas, not in research that failed to promote it.
Okay, what about this? I'm not sure if there's a specific research that can prove with statistical correctness causation, but there is like a lot of anecdotal evidence that, for example, if you grow up in a family where you've observed violence between your parents or experienced physical abuse yourself, especially when you observe violence between your parents, then it is more common. Maybe it's learned behavior to be in a relationship yourself as an adult where there is violence. I'm talking about spousal abuse.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to be insensitive, and even working with cats, like my wife and I do, take in a lot of feral cats that have had pretty unpleasant and sad backgrounds. It takes them a longer time to trust, and they're a little less likable initially because they're afraid to kind of warm up to you, and they're very prone to fear and getting startled and things of this nature. So I'm sure that childhood upbringing plays a role in a lot of things, and genetics undoubtedly plays a role in a lot of things. And just, from my point of view, we don't have those kind of answers. Sometimes I review scientific articles for psychology journals. I'm like one of those reviewers that says it should be published or not. Mm-hmm. And when I read articles, my focus isn't how to interpret the results of the study, but to see if the study should be published. And almost every time, the methodology is so shabby that my conclusion is this shouldn't be published, and that's true of articles that are published already, mm-hmm. as well as articles that are submitted for publication. And I don't mind personally not knowing things. I mean, that's how physics operates, through careful measurement and proving that our theories are not correct. Mm-hmm. And then it leads in an entirely new direction. But I think that the field of psychiatry and psychology, the research still has a long way to go. We're still in a kind of pre-scientific era to a certain extent. And over time, the research and the measurement tools will become more refined, and it will become more like physics or chemistry or astronomy or biology, where we begin to really have powerful technologies to find out about the causes of things. But right now, I think the theories about the causes of things, the things that people talk about and love to explain to other people, this is why this is and this is why that is, to me, those things, to my ear, those things, statements are nearly always not credible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because there are people who grow up in those kinds of families that don't become like their parents, or aren't attracted to people who are in those situations. Like a brother or a sister,
exactly.
Or two sisters might have two different reactions.
Yeah. I read a paper once from Sweden, and I can't find it now. It must have been 35 years ago. But in Sweden, they keep careful data on people, and so they took something like 600 children from the worst homes, where there was, violence, and, they went into foster care, and matched them to 600 children who went, or 300 or 1,000, some huge number, who came from the very best homes with loving parents and all the resources and everything like this. And then they followed them for 20 years. Mm-hmm. to see and measure all kinds of things about them, their academic achievements, did they drop out of school, or did they graduate from high school, from college, all this kind of stuff. And then also their arrest records, their citizenship, types right. of things, and then their relationships with other people. So they had all of this data for over 20 years on these two groups. And what do you think the hugest differences in the two groups were?
If they had one person in their life that they could count on.
Right. And then what do you think that affected? Their relations with others, their criminality, their scholastic achievement, their moods. What do you think the impact was? The biggest differences between these two groups?
Maybe I'm not understanding your question, but I think it had a big impact on their resilience.
On their resilience, that's a good guess. What else do you think it might have affected?
On their relationships.
Relationships. How about their criminality?
Yeah, that too. All of it.
And the achievements. And the answer was there was no difference between the two groups in everything they measured. There just was no effect whatsoever. Now, maybe that was the best study. Maybe it wasn't the best study. It looked good to me, but I thought it was shocking and tremendously interesting. And then what was equally interesting is nobody ever quoted it, because it isn't what people want to hear. And there was that interview with Jeffrey Dahmer on TV. Best interview I ever saw, with him and his dad. Did you see that?
I did not, but you referred to it a couple times.
Well, I won't refer to it again then. But but I mean, he didn't have a bad childhood, and he was a sadistic serial killer, but I never saw a nicer guy. I mean, he was a gentleman. He was humble. He was self-effacing. He owned up to everything, and he said he didn't have an unhappy childhood. That isn't what caused this. So I just think these things are tremendously interesting, and I don't mind not knowing the causes of things. My goal is to really find ways to help people who are depressed and anxious. And I have fun when I analyze data, but my analyses of data, including my own data, it only shows that my thinking is false. And if I'm willing to accept that, it leads me to a new way of looking at things.
Yeah, and isn't that kind of the major difference between Team-CBT and like psychoanalysis?
Yeah,
like
definitely.
In Team-CBT, we don't really, I don't mean to say this so cavalierly, like, oh, we don't care. But the not knowing the causes of things is okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the most important thing is alleviation of suffering and reaching, a joyful life.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, here's Jay's follow-up email. Hi, Dr. And this is exactly what we're talking about.
So
Hi,
is this question number 4 now?
No, it's like 3. His follow-up email to 3.
Okay.
So are we done with that?
Well, it might be good to go on to another one.
Okay, let's do 4. You're right. Okay, so many patients can read your books and do the exercises and recover on their own. Is a teacher or coach sometimes needed to speed things up?
Well, I've always said that. Even when I wrote Feeling Good, I said, I'm not expecting you to be able to cure your own depression just from reading this book. And sometimes you need a good coach to kind of speed your recovery, and there's no shame in that. And I feel the same way today. I'm shocked and pleased that many people can read my books and recover on their own, but I'm not at all surprised that many people get trapped in depression and anxiety or bad relationships and can't do it on their own. So that's the first half of my answer, and then I'll get your input in a second. But the second half of my answer is that, in addition, I think if you have relationship problems, and then you might want to read my book, Feeling Good Together, and learn about the 5 secrets of effective communication and powerful tools for transforming troubled relationships into loving ones. However, I think that almost nobody can learn to do that on your own. Mm-hmm. And you really need a group training experience like the exercises we do in the Tuesday group or your Wednesday group, that you really need a coach to guide you, because people are so blind to the role you play in your own relationship problems. You're always focusing on the other person, blaming the other person, and we don't want to see and cannot see what we're doing that's fueling the conflict. And sometimes you need a coach, an independent person to point that out, to help you with that. What's your idea about that, Rhonda?
Well, you asked earlier if I'm upset, will I fill out a daily mood log? And I said I do. And often when I fill it out, I feel incomplete unless I have somebody to talk about it with, and somebody I can share it with and get their feedback and brainstorm. And even when I'm going through my own positive reframing, thinking, what do these thoughts say about me, or and these feelings say about me that's awesome or protective or my core values, I want somebody else to, maybe it's validate, but maybe I don't think it's validate. Like, I have this idea. Do they have other ideas? And kind of push me along. Yeah. So, like, I can do it on my own, but I like that push that I get with other people.
And the assist and the warmth and the support.
Yeah.
It's the same in technology, too. I get stuck. I manage, for the most part, my own website, feelinggood.com, and I get stuck a lot. I don't know how to do something, or I get puzzled. And it's nice to go to their support. They call them happiness engineers, I think they call them.
That's a really good name.
Yeah, and they're free, at least for my website, for the subscription I have. And they get on immediately, and they kind of guide me and help me out. And I just love that help and support. And I learn, too.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had to do it on my own, some of this stuff, it might take me months to figure it out, if ever. And then usually the answer's pretty simple. And that's why I like doing therapy, because I can guide people before my eyes from despair into joy and enlightenment. And it's exciting for the patient, and it's exciting for me too.
Cool. I'm going to remind you of when you say that, when you talk about your app and you say this is going to eliminate therapists.
No, I've never said that, have I?
Well, you haven't said...
What I've said is I'm developing an app that I hope will outperform human therapists. But I've never said it's going to put human therapists out of business. It's just going to, whether you're in therapy or out therapy, I think the app, the feelinggood.com app, can greatly accelerate your recovery. But many people will still very much want, and we're trying to figure out how to do that, to provide coaches or people who can help the people who are using the app, those who want more than just the app itself.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, here's the next question. I am reading chapter 1 from your book, Intimate Connections. Is it possible for a person to become happy without needing anyone else if they have depression in their past and or post-traumatic stress disorder? I say it like this because in your podcast, you explain there will be a relapse from recovery from depression and anxiety.
Well, I don't see how these two questions are connected.
Yeah, me either.
But I'll answer the first one, and the answer to that is yes.
Yes, as a matter of fact, not only is it yes, but that's a great goal to have in life, to be happy whether you need somebody or not, just to be happy on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you can't be happy on your own, you're never going to get happiness from another person. Other people can't give you what you can't give yourself. Mm-hmm. And the first chapter of Intimate Connections, or the first section of the book, is all about how to become happy, totally happy when you're alone. And when people come to me for help with dating, I'll say, would you like me to transform your love life from rags to riches? And they say, oh, yes, please. I'll say, I'll be happy to do that. That's my best area of genius. But I won't do it until you've learned to be happy on your own. Mm-hmm. And once you no longer need love to feel totally happy and fulfilled, only then will I teach you the rules of dating and forming intimate relationships. Because if you don't do that, then when you get into the dating arena, you'll be needy and desperate, and you'll need that person, and you'll be afraid of losing them because you'll think you can't be happy when you're alone, and that itself will drive people away. But once you no longer need people, you might still want a relationship, but you won't need someone to feel happy and fulfilled. Mm-hmm. Then you have something to offer other people, and you're what they can't get because you don't need anyone else. So they've got to chase you. And in the dating arena, the one who gets chased has all the power. The one who does the chasing has no power and typically gets rejected. So that's why, from let's say a metaphysical and practical perspective, it's highly desirable to discover that you can be happy when you're alone. But you have to use tools and techniques that will prove that to you.
Right. Okay, here's Jay's last question. How would Team-CBT address treating post-traumatic stress disorder? Post-traumatic stress disorder can involve a person having multiple traumas, of course, and one single trauma.
Well, the only difference I see in treating people who have had traumatic experiences versus those who are just coming in with depression that isn't triggered by a traumatic experience is people who've had traumatic experiences have always been massively easier for me to treat. And I've rarely ever had a trauma patient who didn't recover in a single session. Now, it'd be a 2-hour session because that's the way I work. And I wrote a book about it recently called Feeling Great. And you can get it on Amazon, and those are the techniques. It's TEAM. That's how I treat people who have had traumas and people who have not had traumas. But it's always the same thing. Your depression doesn't result from external events, from traumas or anything else, but from your thoughts about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tremendous. And the thoughts will be distorted if you're feeling depressed or anxious, even if the trauma was real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just tremendously exciting that we have powerful techniques now that can help people change the way you think and feel, regardless of your circumstances. If you're, at my hospital in Philadelphia, all of our patients had tons of trauma. We were working with homeless people. I remember in one of the groups, I was asking the people, what happens to you when you have low self-esteem? And there were about 15 people in the group, and they went around, they would cry. One man said, I'm homeless, and I cry when I see someone passing me with a suit. And I say, he probably has a wife, and he has a home, and he has people who love him, and he has a job, and I can't read or write. I didn't make it through the 5th grade. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows where I am. Nobody cares about me. And I just feel like a worthless human being, things like that. And yet these people were the easiest people I've ever worked with. And I was just so happy. And our program was more or less free to everybody. Mm-hmm. And we put thousands of people through the group cognitive therapy program I developed at the hospital. And that's where we used 10 days to self-esteem. But I don't know why there's so much hullabaloo about people who have had traumas. You've personally had traumas. Most of us have had traumas. I had a pretty, to me, traumatic event, within the past week or so, and kind of keeping me up at night. I think we all have, shocking, disturbing things that happen to us throughout our lives. And I think it's a great message for people that when you change the way you think, you can change the way you feel. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people don't believe it because they're so hypnotized by this belief that our feelings are caused by what happens to us. And while there's certainly some truth to that, it makes you a victim of forces beyond your control, because you can't change reality. If you've had traumatic experiences, you can't cause them to disappear.
Right. You can't pretend that they didn't happen. They happened.
Exactly.
But for example, if you've experienced a rape and you have the thought in yourself, and if you have the thought that you keep repeating to yourself, I did something that caused that rape. Then exactly. You'll extend the pain and the suffering that the terrible experience caused for you. But if you can change that thought, then you're going to be able to, alleviate that kind of suffering and that depression that's caused by the thought.
Yeah, and I call that the abuse contract. There's often a contract between an abuser and a victim. And the worst example of this was a patient I saw who had horrible sexual abuse from a babysitter, a really sadistic man from age 5 to 10. Mm. And I was the first person she told about it. She had horrific depression for 35 years or something. She came to me when she was like 45, and she trusted to confide to me about what had happened. She'd kept it a secret the whole time. And the abuse contract has 3 dimensions, 3 stipulations. First, I get to use you for my own pleasure. I can hurt you, I can abuse you sexually, or hurt you physically, or exploit you financially, or whatever. That's the first thing you have to agree to. The second thing you have to agree to is it's all going to be your fault. Because I'm kind of a godlike person, And you're the one who's to blame. And third, we have to keep this a secret.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever tell anyone or even tell me that I'm hurting you, I'm really going to hurt you. And this was going on with this woman, because she was telling herself, I was a dirty little girl. It was my fault. And if anyone knew what happened to me, they'd think I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see all three parts. It's my fault that this man she called the sailor man sadistically abused me. Number two, if anyone finds out, they'll think I liked it. So she'd kept it a secret, even from her parents, for 35 years.
Wow.
And then, of course, the first part of the contract is I get to hurt you for my pleasure. And that had gone on 3 times a week, approximately, for 5 years, until when she was 10, he was killed in a fight in a bar.
Wow.
And when she found that out, she was relieved and overjoyed and was never abused again, but kept it a secret for 35 years of suffering.
Wow. Oh, that's a really intense note to end the podcast on. Let's ask.
I might say that she did recover.
Did she
had
recover?
a fantastic outcome. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this might be a good time to stop, because the podcast has been 45 minutes long, and maybe we could, thank Jay for all of these 6 questions and move on to the next 7 or 8 at our next podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Rhonda. I love today's podcast.
Me too.
I always do. Almost always. Every now and then.
Okay, like 1 in a million.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone for listening. Till next time. This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.